The Mystery of the Letters. Chapter 1. The Journey Through States. Jack Morgan never imagined that his usual journey through several states would turn into something extraordinary. He was driving his truck, listening to the radio, and enjoying the peace of the road. Stopping at a roadside cafe was routine for a truck driver, but this time, everything was different. The cafe was cozy, filled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and homemade pastries. Jack entered, ordered coffee, and sat by the window. At that moment, a middle-aged woman with a kind but tired face approached him. She introduced herself as Mary and asked him for a favor. "I know this might sound strange," she began, "but I have a letter for my son. Could you deliver it to him?" Jack was surprised by the request, but looked at the envelope she was holding. The address was neatly written on it, and it turned out to be not far from his route. "Sure," he replied, "no problem, but why not use email or a phone?" Mary smiled, but there was something strange in her eyes. "It's personal," she said. "Thank you very much." She handed him the envelope, thanked him, and left. Jack remained seated, looking at the letter, and the sense of strangeness lingered. The journey through the states was long, but Jack enjoyed every mile. He loved the freedom his job gave him and the opportunity to see new places. With every mile closer to the address on the envelope, he thought more about Mary's unusual request. Chapter 2. Journey with the Letter. Jack continued his journey through the states, thinking about Mary's strange request. The road stretched for miles ahead of him, and he enjoyed the landscapes passing by his truck windows. His mind kept returning to why this woman had chosen to send a letter through him instead of using modern communication methods. With each city and town he passed, Jack felt more involved in this mysterious story. Memories of his short encounter with Mary in the cafe resurfaced. Her kind but tired gaze, her smile full of hidden sadness. He couldn't get the envelope out of his mind, now lying on the passenger seat of his truck. Jack's journey was long, and he met many people along the way. Truck drivers often share stories when they meet at rest stops or gas stations. One evening, stopping for the night at one such station, Jack met John, another driver, and they chatted over a cup of coffee. "Something's bothering you, buddy," John noted. "You can share if you want." Jack wasn't someone who easily shared his worries, but something about that night and John's friendly face encouraged openness. He told him about Mary and her request. "Strange story," John said, "but you know, sometimes people prefer old-fashioned ways. Maybe it's important to her." Jack nodded, thinking about John's words. Maybe there was some truth to it, but still, something about this story didn't sit right with him. The next day, he continued his journey. With each hour, he got closer to the address on the envelope. Finally, as the evening shadows grew longer, he arrived at a small house on the outskirts of town. It was an ordinary house, unremarkable, but with a strange aura. Jack got out of the truck, taking the envelope with him. As he approached the door, he noticed another person standing on the porch, holding an envelope. The man greeted Jack politely, and they exchanged puzzled looks. Soon, several more drivers approached, all with envelopes. Chapter 3. The Meeting at the Door. Jack and the other drivers standing on the porch exchanged bewildered glances. Each of them held an envelope, and they all seemed to be there for the same reason. Finally, the door opened, and a middle-aged man with a look of astonishment on his face appeared. "Can I help you?" he asked, looking at the gathered crowd. All the drivers, almost simultaneously, uttered the same phrase. "We have a letter for you from your mother." The man, clearly shocked, stared at the envelopes in the driver's hands. He couldn't believe his eyes. Thomas Green, Mary's son, was as stunned as the gathered drivers. He remembered his mother, who had died many years ago in a car accident. Her car had fallen off a bridge into a river, and her body was never found. "This must be some kind of sick joke," Thomas finally said, barely holding back his emotions. "My mother died many years ago." The drivers began talking at once, sharing their stories of how they met the woman and received the envelope from her. Each story had its own detail, but they all boiled down to one thing. They saw her, talked to her, and some even shared a coffee with her. "This is impossible," Thomas repeated. "It's just impossible." Taking all the envelopes, he thanked the drivers for their efforts and dismissed them, leaving him alone on the porch. Thomas returned to the house and sat at the table, spreading out all the letters before him. Tears ran down his cheeks as he opened one envelope after another. All the letters were short, just one sentence, "Do not look for me here." But one letter was different. It read, "Floating with the current." At that moment, Thomas realized that his mother's spirit was seeking peace, and he decided to find her body and lay it to rest properly. Chapter 4. Unraveling the Mystery. Thomas, sitting at the table surrounded by letters, couldn't believe his eyes. All these letters were from his mother, who had died many years ago. His mind couldn't grasp what was happening, and he decided to conduct his own investigation. Memories of his mother and her work often resurfaced in his mind, but now he needed answers to the questions that haunted him. He began by studying the places where his mother had worked before the tragedy. He found her old diary, which contained routes and towns she visited. Thomas gathered all the necessary things and set out to uncover the truth. Meanwhile, Jack, also shaken by the whole story, couldn't leave Thomas alone in this difficult situation. He decided to help him in the investigation. Together, they began their journey following Mary's tracks, unaware of the secrets they were about to uncover. The first place they headed to was a small town where Mary had worked before the tragedy. They met people who knew her, and everyone spoke highly of her. But one woman, who was a close friend of Mary, unexpectedly mentioned a secret club Mary was a part of. This club was known for its research into supernatural phenomena and communication with spirits. Mary was one of the active members of this club. Thomas and Jack realized that this might be the key to the mystery of the letters. They decided to find other members of the club and discover what exactly Mary had been researching. Chapter 5. Traces of the Past. Jack and Thomas continued their search, visiting various towns and meeting people who might know about the club. In one town, they met an old man named Henry, who was the founder of the club. Henry told them that Mary was obsessed with the idea of contacting the spirit world, especially after losing a loved one. He also mentioned a secret practice that Mary used to communicate with spirits. It was an ancient method involving writing letters and having them delivered by living people to the recipient. Henry gave them an old book that described all the rituals and practices of the club. With this book, Thomas and Jack continued their journey, hoping to find more answers. They began exploring places where Mary had performed her rituals. In one such place, an abandoned house on the outskirts of a forest, they stumbled upon a hidden room filled with old letters and photographs. Among these letters, they found one addressed to Thomas. It was written by Mary before her death. In the letter, she explained that her soul couldn't find peace until her body was found and laid to rest. She asked Thomas to find her and give her a proper burial. Chapter 6. The Source of the Letters. Armed with new information, Thomas and Jack continued their search. They consulted experts in supernatural phenomena to understand how Mary's spirit could be sending letters. One of the experts, a professor named Rachel, explained that such phenomena were possible if the deceased soul was experiencing intense emotional distress. Rachel also suggested conducting a cleansing ritual to help Mary's spirit find peace. For this, they needed to find the place where the tragedy occurred and perform a special rite there. Thomas and Jack decided this was their only chance to help Mary. They returned to the river where the car accident had happened many years ago. With Rachel's help, they began the ritual. Unexpectedly, during the rite, strange glowing lights appeared on the water's surface. It seemed like a sign. At that moment, Thomas realized that Mary was trying to tell them something. He remembered the words from the last letter, "floating with the current." He walked along the river, following the lights. Jack and Rachel followed him. Chapter 7. Finding Peace. Thomas, Jack, and Rachel walked along the river, following the glowing lights. They walked several miles until they reached an old bridge. Under the bridge, among the rocks and weeds, they found Mary's car. Her body was still inside, trapped in a time capsule. Thomas could barely hold back his tears as they pulled the body from the water. This was the moment he had been waiting for all these years. Jack and Rachel helped him carry the body to the shore. They organized a funeral at the local cemetery, inviting everyone who knew and loved Mary. It was a touching moment filled with tears and memories. Thomas felt that his mother had finally found peace. Chapter 8. Returning to Life. After the funeral, Thomas felt that his life had changed. He finally said goodbye to his mother and gave her peace. The letters he received became a reminder of her love and care. He decided to keep them as a family heirloom. Jack returned to his job, but now he knew his role in this story was not accidental. He realized that sometimes even the simplest actions could lead to incredible and mystical events. He continued his travels on the roads, but now with a new understanding and gratitude for everything that happened. The story of the letters that connected the worlds of the living and the dead came to an end. But both Jack and Thomas knew that there was still much unknown, hiding beyond the boundaries of our reality. The end. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our channel and don't forget to hit the like button. Thank you for your attention.